Last minute shakeup at 5:30 a.m., laundry situation not good. And when your focus is on helping your clients, it's easy to forget about yourself. But NASM knows trainers.
Morning ride is okay.
And staying in front of the day isn't always as simple as 1, 2, 3. So when the unexpected has you pressing pause,
what's the latest on creatine?
I'm going to get back to you on that.
Let NASM1 help you press play. Visit NASM.org to sign up for a membership today.
Hello, and welcome back to the NASM Master Instructor Roundtable, where top minds in fitness come together to dive deep into science, strategy, and stories that drive human performance. I'm Marty Miller, here with my co-host, Wendy Batts. Today, we're stepping onto the green and into the gym with a very special guest, Scott Stallings, PGA Tour veteran, elite athlete, and someone who's undergone an incredible personal transformation, both on and off the course. From reshaping his body and mind through fitness to competing at the highest levels of golf, Scott will share his powerful journey, the wins, the lessons, and the work it took to get there. We'll also explore the intersection of technology, training, and performance, and how wearables and data and innovation are changing the game in both golf and fitness. So Wendy, I know you're a big tech fan. I know you're a big golf fan, and I know today is going to be a great episode.
Today is going to be a great episode. And I don't know about the tech part of that, Marty, considering I was having some issues with my computer, but I'm super, super excited to have Scott come and join us. So why don't we just go ahead and bring him on in? Hey, Scott, how are you?
Good. How are you guys?
Good. Thank you for being here, because we know that your schedule is really crazy these days. So I'm going to go ahead and kick off the first question, because there's a lot of information we want to cover and get as much info from you as we can. So before we get into the training and tech, as Marty just talked about, let's rewind a little bit. So can you tell us what first sparked your interest for the love of golf?
Golf was something I've, done my whole life, but it was something I kind of did in the midst of, baseball, soccer, basketball, all the different sports seasons. And then, golf changed forever when Tiger won the Masters, and it's just kind of like the perfect time of my life. I made my first hole-in-one the week before the Masters. Tiger wins, and next thing you know, you're like, man, I want to be this is what I want to do. And I don't know if I ever really understood, like at that moment, like to pursue a career, in professional golf, but it was something that I knew I wanted to sort of chase after and, progress that into college. And, then I had a college coach that, had played on tour for a little bit, and, I had never really even thought about it, and just sort of wanted just to continue to get better. And he said, I think that you can play on tour. And that was the kind of one of the first times someone believed in me than more than I believed in myself. And I kind of carried that on, and, been able to feel very fortunate to be able to do it for the last 14 years. And, hopefully longer than that once I get this shoulder and elbow sorted out.
Thanks for that, Scott. Scott, you and I have known each other from, my techno gym days. I know that you're a fitness enthusiast, and you mentioned Tiger. So obviously he was one of the first to really take fitness to a whole nother level within the game of golf. And, you're not known just for golf, but that fitness level and that transformation. So what sparked the change, and how did you build your current training programs?
It was a lot of negligence, a lot of mistakes. And, I was young and thought, as long as I could just make birdies, I could sort of do whatever I want whenever I wanted to do it. And, you look up, you're 30, you played on tour for the last 6 years, and you're like, man, why do I feel so bad? And you start to look at yourself, and, it doesn't take very long to realize that everything kind of points to you. And there was no plan. There was no understanding of recovery. There was no diet, nutrition, no sleep routine, no nothing. And you throw that on top of a very stressful individual job that involves traveling about 300 days a year. Like, you're kind of a ticking time bomb of, being just a walking mess. And so I had some awesome people come around me. My trainer, PT Adam Curley, is a huge impact of, it all kind of started with him. And, we were acquaintances at the time. He sort of helped me, in the midst of my career when I would come back and forth to Knoxville in between events and sort of put the pieces back together. And, just in that moment of, me trying to really feel like what a healthy lifestyle looked like to kind of manage as a professional golfer. Like, he was the first person I leaned on and kind of showed me what that looked like. And it was kind of an incremental process to kind of figure out and, kind of what worked best for me and what was actually truly actionable. Cause you inherently, as a person that's a high achiever, it's like, oh, I can do it all at once. And quickly did I realize that that is not possible. So
Well, I know I got the opportunity to work alongside of Adam a little bit. I had a player that was worked with me in the off season, as well as working with Adam during the on season, if you will. But can you actually talk about that? Because I think that's what, as trainers, sometimes we get confused when you're working with a professional athlete. How do you differentiate your workouts when you're in season and off season? Can you kind of walk us through what you do and the differences between the two?
So the way that the PGA Tour season is put together, you have no opportunity for like a periodization cycle or, any type of, oh man, I'm going to be in a strength phase. I'm going to be in this, I'm going to be in that. Like, there's a hypothetical world where that's happens, but anyone that truly understands like true hypertrophy or anything, like, that's not real in terms of to play at a high level. You could go and make it happen, but something is going to give. And sort of like you're the master of one or the master of none. And, kind of what needs to be important in that moment is, can kind of get lost in a pursuit of, trying to do too many things at once. But I kind of always gave the example of, you would take a way you'd put together a periodization cycle or anything where you would go heavier, slower, longer as the week starts to shorter, faster, lighter. And, all relative to, your tee times, how many events you've played in a row, travel, all the different sorts of like what part of the season it is, and all with respect to, trying to be ready when your name's called on Thursday.
Yeah, Wendy and I have done a lot of these podcasts on programming, and I love that you threw in periodization and the different phases. So clearly, we know that you are a student of this, and I know you have coaches, and you mentioned Adam, but it's great to see that you've gone deeper into that level of knowledge. So Scott, before we got on air today, we were talking about where you're at in your career. You've had some injuries, but you turned that frustration into a new challenge, which you were the first person on tour to ever accomplish this. So can you share with our audience what we're referring to here?
Yeah, I had shoulder surgery in June. I tore my bicep tendon and labrum on the 5th hole of the Players Championship in 2024. Kind of a freak accident up against the lip of the bunker. Ball comes out. So it was just kind of a mess there for a little bit. And Adam, we keep referencing, was right there all along. He's the reason I finished the round. He was the reason I played the next week. Him and Dr. Sprouse, two guys that are near and dear to my heart, both here in Knoxville, Tennessee, and sort of help, manage a bunch of different guys' careers, on and off, the road, and kind of all the different things that come along with playing at a high level. But so I had surgery there, and I had to have an elbow procedure on my ulnar nerve in November, and kind of a little bit of surprise, and through frustration and a little bit of time with some buddies at home, I was given the book by Steve Magnus, Do Hard Things. And 2 days later, I tried to figure out a way to get involved and run the Boston Marathon, and I was able to do that about a month ago.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I found out when I got finished, CBS interviewed me, and they were like, "You realize you're the first active PGA Tour player to run the Boston Marathon?" I said, "I did not know that." I don't think that would have changed anything for me, but I might have been a little bit more careful, like running through the crowd or, anything just to avoid disaster in the start. But I was born in New England, just down the road in Worcester, Massachusetts, a ton of family and friends. And I turned 40 right before that. So a chance to go and celebrate, sort of adverse circumstances of the opportunity to be there. I don't think it's necessarily a very likely feat of someone to take the time and effort to go and safely train for a marathon in the midst of playing a full schedule on the PGA Tour. So it was kind of the perfect timing for me to be able to do. And it was an awesome distraction when I was pretty limited in what I could do on and off the golf course, and especially in the gym So it's kind of the only part of my day I didn't really have to think about. And so had a awesome group of guys kind of helped me. I'd never really run in my life. So like you could put me in a gym and, hey, we're training for this. And, it wouldn't take me very long to kind of program something out or, kind of get an idea of sort of like what the best use case scenario is. But if you just told me how I ended up planning to run and what I thought I needed to do, I mean, it would have looked like we were doing two completely different things. So I was pretty naive to what that kind of programming looked like and that type of volume. You need to go ahead and do it. So I was thankful that I kind of fell on the words and experience of a lot of people that had done it before me for sure. So
Scott, I will say this: I've ran one marathon in my life. One marathon. I said I wanted to do something. I said in my head something that I didn't want to do before I turned 25. So I chose a marathon out of why I don't know. I hate running. Not my thing. It was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, probably because I didn't train the right way. So can you kind of walk us through a little bit? You're doing your rehab. So how do you manage to do your training for running, and why did you choose a marathon over like a half marathon or something if you've never done this before? Why did you go big?
I don't know. I think just inherently people that are high achievers kind of reach for the stars, I guess, if you want to be cliche or use some terminology like that. But I think there was, Boston is near and dear to my heart. Like I said, I was born up there, a ton of family, and if you're going to do something, you might as well try to be a part of something great. And so within that, I ran in the training process, I ran 3 half marathons and a 30K, just to kind of get used to kind of what the race environment was. And, anybody that's been to Boston, you can't recreate that. There's 38,000 people that ran that day, and it was nuts, to say the least. But it was basically I would rehab, whatever that kind of schedule looked like, I would train, and then I would just run. And that was kind of it. And I think it was probably good for my family. I've been married for 18 years to my wife, Jennifer, and I have a 12-year-old son, Finn, and a 9-year-old daughter, Millie. And I think the fact that I sort of, had something that I wasn't very good at, and, that took a lot of time and something that I could sort of scratch the itch of, competing a little bit. I think that it helped me. Definitely. It was, great peace of mind, especially learning from the process of something I really knew nothing about. And that was kind of part of the book too, that Steve wrote. He talked about overcoming injury and, sort of embracing new challenges to kind of, teach you lessons about what you're striving to get back to. And, so it was cool. I had an opportunity to chat with Steve, do a podcast with him, and kind of hear the coaching mentality of how he came to the book, and just sort of how he said, I never envisioned when I wrote that book, I would have a guy that, plays on the PGA Tour that uses it to do something totally opposite. So it was multi-purpose. So it was a cool thing to be a part of.
That's very inspiring for all those that are listening, and have challenges in their lives. And, with our audience here, obviously they're passionate about fitness and they work with people that are, trying to get better. So, in the past, you've talked a lot about taking ownership of your health. So what role do fitness professionals and or coaches still play in your programming today?
A lot. We sort of do guidelines, RPE, and, sort of, understanding as far as if and when, and then sort of like, imagine if you were going to build like almost like a workout template, and then you let the person that's training, kind of be creative, to not where we get redundant, where it's sort of new. And that's kind of the thing I've enjoyed about programming the most. We have a training program with HWPO, Hard Work Pays Off, with the CrossFit Games champion, Matt Frazier, and bringing that into the world of golf has been very interesting to kind of, plug and play. Hey, you're going to have a rotational component. You're going to have, just an example of, throw some type of like cardio sprint with an elevated heart rate, and you got to push, you got to pull, and some type of explosive movement. And then you start to be able to learn and educate, because y'all know just as well as I do, like the better you do your job, the less they need you. So it's kind of a give and take. And so the guys that helped me definitely kind of keep a little bit of an overwatch. But like today I was with Adam and he was, treating my arm, and he's like, man, just kind of show me some of the stuff you've been doing. Cause we built out a template as far as a progression based off of from the surgeon, kind of, marrying the two worlds of a nerve issue and a structural issue, and how you would kind of rehab both those in the best, because it's kind of hard to do two things at once, because you need the stability and just the tone to kind of support the elbow, but then you need the explosivity of the shoulder, as it kind of progresses back to be able to handle like high speed and torque. And so just kind of, it's been a really cool process to be a part of. And thankfully I got some great dudes around me to kind of help push me back to be ready to play on tour again.
Well, you are in Knoxville. I'm a huge Tennessee fan, if anyone cares, doesn't know that, by the way. So this makes me extremely happy listening to all this good stuff that's going on in that area of the country. But Scott, I've got some other questions, but before we go into those, this episode of the Master Instructor Roundtable is brought to you by NASM One, the membership for trainers and coaches. Members enjoy unlimited access to hundreds of career resources. Get the Edge app to schedule and program clients. Enjoy half off all certifications and specializations. Access free CEUs and more. All of this for just $35 a month. Go to nasm.org/membership to learn more about NASM One. All right, Scott. So my next question is actually going to start to bring in the tech component of this podcast. So those of you guys joining us, we do have Scott Stallings joining us. He is a PGA, he's just amazing on the tour. And he is going to talk to us a little bit about your journey. So when we talk about the journey of the PGA and what you've gone through, of course, you told us kind of how you got into it, but how has your partnership with Garmin influenced your approach to training, both on and off the course?
It's been an interesting world, because I sort of got into it had nothing to do with golf. It was just sort of something that I wanted a way to sort of quantify what I was doing. Like I said, when we first started, I mean, a full season is about 250 to 300 days on a year. So, trying to recreate your home environment on the road is a constant challenge, and kind of figuring out like the best case scenario of, hey, I do well with this at home. I do well with this. I do well with this. And just trying to be able to figure out a way to recreate that. So using data to kind of understand what it works best for me, might not work best for someone else, but understand the need, like, contrast therapy is a huge part of what I do at home on the road. So recreating that. And I mean, you have the data to be able to prove it, as far as just kind of tracking all those different things. So that's how it started. Then the training component just kind of fell into it. I mean, it was something that I was doing already, and, pretty easy transition. And then the golf was pretty interesting as they started kind of diving more and more into it. I wish it was the case where I could wear and use some of the technology when I played. You could use it when you practice, but definitely sort of frowned upon in competition. But it's been pretty cool to be a part of the process and kind of see how far they've come in the last couple of years. And then I kind of fell right into their wheelhouse when I told them I was starting to do the marathon, and they were huge supporters of that. Was able to do a couple things with them in Boston with the real runners. They did like a Garmin picture of all the athletes, and you can clearly tell, like, what's wrong with that guy? He doesn't look like the rest of them. So, pretty incredible what the company's built as far as the potential. Just from like my son and I went last year and toured the facility and kind of saw like just all the different facets of the company. And it, everyone just, whatever version of Garmin you see, whether you're a fisherman or a hiker or a runner or a golfer or whatever, there's some form that's in there. And then you look over, and the crossover between all the different things that they're capable of are pretty incredible.
Scott, you keep talking about the runners, but here's the thing: you accomplish more in their sport than they'll ever accomplish in your sport. So I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I'm impressed. So, as we talk about golf, it obviously demands precision, endurance, recovery. How have you used Garmin's wearable technology to help you monitor that and then optimize your performance throughout your transformation, especially now that you even added the marathon in there?
Yeah. So before the marathon and everything, the biggest compliment I was ever given in my entire career is by Chris Henshaw. I met him at Whole Foods, big endurance specialist, especially in the CrossFit space, Ironman, this and that. And I tracked him down at Whole Foods in Knoxville, Tennessee. We had a bunch of mutual friends, and I sat and just said, man, can we just have a conversation? I'm super interested in what you do, all the aerobic capacity stuff, all the different stuff. And he said, man, just kind of like break it down for me. Like, what does a week look like, this and that? And he's like, man, you're an endurance athlete. And I was like, you know what? We are. And he's like, man, your time on your feet and, the miles you guys walk and this and that. And so as my relationship with Garmin sort of, manifested a little bit, everyone's involved in their year in total. What did I walk? What did I do? How many workouts I do? How did I sleep? All this and that. And then it got to the point where I kind of always told them, I was like, I don't think you realize the volume of steps that a PGA Tour player accumulates in the course of a season. And so they did the athlete rundown of all the different Garmin athletes. And there was some ultra guy that had 8.2 million steps, which is absurd, that over the course of a year. And number 2 was myself over all the runners. And I did 6.7 million in a season over the course of that. And, average PGA Tour week for me is 83 miles. The longest week of the year is the Masters, 127. The shortest week is Hilton Head, which is odd because they're back-to-back weeks at 67 miles. And so, I mean, you got to not only do you do something incredibly difficult with, precision and skill and, managing all the different elements that kind of go into it, but also, man, you got to be able to handle time on your feet. So I think that was probably the easiest transition to go from the marathon stuff. I was so used to being upright for really, really long periods of time that didn't really take me anything to get used to. It just sort of managing the speed and direction in which I was going.
I love it. Well, I have a 2-part question, if you will. So the first part, obviously, you were just talking about recovery and its importance, and that is a big pillar in the NASM OPT model that we talk about a lot on this show. So how has Garmin helped you better understand your recovery, your sleep, and stress management? But then also, what do you do to prepare yourself before you do, you go out and you play? Are you foam rolling? Are you using percussion devices? Are you stretching? Does someone work with you? How does that look like in your world?
Yeah, this maybe definitely turned into a Adam Curley podcast, but I mean, he sort of and a Kevin Sprouse podcast. But I mean, those two guys are, the reason I've been able to play as long as I have, and kind of teaching me what the best version of myself looks like. Hey, this is sort of how you respond, and just from a recovery standpoint, I'm fortunate in the fact of cupping, needling, scraping, manual, manipulation, all the different stuff. I respond pretty well to all those things. I'm sure I have some that I prefer better than the other. Adam scraped my elbow today. It was horrible. But just understanding what kind of works best for that. But in terms of getting prime ready to play, I've got a pretty normal warm-up routine that I do. Some time on the table with Adam, sort of checking, assessing, and seeing if there's progressive things that I've been kind of fighting, or just kind of overuse stuff that kind of shows up with someone that does an asymmetrical sport thousands of times in a month under the biggest stress there is. So there's a lot of things to kind of undo. And I think in a pretty typical training world, you'd like to see both sides work at the same time, but just in the volume of golf that we play, that's unrealistic. I can't just go swing that many times left. That's just that's just not happening. And so utilizing the gym a lot to kind of help balance that and sort of help, restart the day at zero and continue where you don't work yourself into a hole where eventually you have some type of, issue, most likely resulting in some type of injury.
Great. So Scott, I'm going to ask you a personal favor now. So Wendy's worked with a ton of recreational and elite golfers. I spent 18 years in private country clubs, and somehow the members would just skip by the gym, say they don't have time to warm up. They grab their 7-iron, do one or two stretches and start hitting golf balls. You know, we helped put the trailers together as they are now with Techno Gym. I tried to explain to people how much time elite athletes who are a lot younger than the athletes we're talking about with the recreational athletes spend even before they pick up a club. Can you give our audience an understanding of what you'd say the average tour player does? You know, duration, you know, everyone's gonna maybe have their own routine, but how serious they are about their movement prep before they ever grab a club on tour.
I would be bold enough to say that more often than not, maybe outside of like seeing the speed of the green, pretty much every guy on tour could go straight from the trailer to the first tee.
Wow.
Like they would just bypass the range. Maybe you got a guy that's working on something or something like that, but like, you know, we had this conversation the other day. I built a cool gym at my house, you know, have a cold tub and a sauna in the back. And I tell everybody, like, man, if I had to pick one, I would pick the cold tub and the sauna. There's a lot of ways to train. It's just fortunate enough to be able to have all of it kind of in one area. And the same way, it's like, oh, if you had to gym warm up or you had a driving range, like I'm gym warm up every time. Like I can do so many things in there to kind of get my body going. And I've hit enough golf balls to know like it's not going to take me very long if I warm up the right way to, you know, sort of get myself ready to go. So I think, you know, people, you know, guys on tour warm up way different. You know, it's obviously we're a bunch of individuals that all do the same thing a bunch of different ways. And I think that as my career is involved, I spend way more time in the gym, way more time on the table, kind of get myself going. And the range is just, it is what it is. It is a glorified warm up. Yeah, there's a small technical component maybe here or there, but for the most part, it's just kind of getting your mind, your body ready. But, you know, the true most important part of what we do happens whether it's a unique course setting where we have access to a gym on site or the trailer or, you know, some variation of a PT or trainer kind of involved in there. But, you know, that to do it at the level we need to be able to do it as many times as we need to build, that cannot be like, you can go without hitting some balls, but that's sort of a non-negotiable.
Love it.
I love it
Thank
too.
you.
So Scott, I'm going to kind of go off script a little bit. We've been talking so much about the physical component, but I know with like my Garmin watch, it'll show like my body battery or it'll show my stress level, depending on different things that are going on in life. So let's talk mental, like the mental component, because golf, I mean, yes, you have to be able to hit it. Your club head speed matters. Where the ball ends up obviously is super important. But how do you mentally prepare? Like you're going on to the Masters, you know, hole number one, they're introducing your name. Everybody is staring at you. How do you calm yourself down when you're approaching that ball, like in these huge tournaments?
We're really good at compartmentalization. If ask any of our wives, we're like, I could definitely forget to take the trash out. But if you ask me what I hit on the second hole my rookie year, I'd probably be able to tell you. And I think it just sort of accesses a different part of your brain. Like, I mean, the three of us could go out and play golf and I could look incredibly average and be like, man, I just don't see how this guy's played for a long period of time. And, you know, next thing you know, now driving from Knoxville, Tennessee, Scott, is like something clicks in my brain and sort of like, that's where I go to compete. And I'm super comfortable in that environment, but that doesn't just happen. You said you're a ball fan. I spent 2 days ago, I was up at Oakmont with one of our University of Tennessee players that qualified for the U.S. Open, and Lance Simpson, who just got named All-American. So it's pretty cool to see that. And like, he just wanted someone to kind of show him like how to prepare. He's never played a PGA Tour, never played a major. And like, I said, man, the golf course is going to take care of itself. Like, you're going to do the work. You're going to kind of know the nuance and, you know, kind of see, and you got some good guys around you to kind of help make decisions. Our head coach at Tennessee, Brennan Webb's going to caddy for him. And, you know, he's experienced and they're going to have no problem with all that, but more just from the mental side. Hey, this is what this is going to look like. This is all these things. And, you know, my job was just to kind of put him in a situation. And when he got back up there, he wasn't surprised. And, as soon as you get the surprise element, that's when the reaction comes in, and then the reaction goes to what you're comfortable. And then you're kind of, you're spinning the wheel at that moment. And, so that just tried to, get him in the spot of where, I mean, we were 10 minutes into the parking lot. He goes, man, there's a lot going on. And I said, buddy, there's nobody here. I said, you haven't seen the first fan. And so, that's kind of a unique scenario. And I said, man, I actually do better when there's more people. It kind of focuses you in, on the target at hand, and the noise doesn't really bother you. And sort of, I think that's where you sort of get adjusted to your environment, to where, like, I kind of need a little bit of that to sort of get engaged and sort of wherever. And just like I was using the example before, if we played, like, we would have fun and you could kind of see, like, man, this guy actually kind of knows what he's doing. But it's a lot different when the lights come on. And at least that's sort of the terminology that I use, and something that one of the guys that was caddying in his group was like, man, is he all right? And I said, man, there's no oxygen up there right now. And, we're not even hitting a shot that matters. So, hopefully, utilizing our time that day sort of helped him sort of get over that. And then, 15 minutes later, he's back to being who we know he is, and, sort of just continue to create that environment and practice dealing with uncomfortable situations. So how your body reacts, how your mind reacts, and then sort of where the playing competition is just another version of that, just with a little bit different, because there's only one thing to think about at the time, and that's the shot in front of you.
Great advice. Great story as well. So we'll be watching the next week. Go Vols, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So, Scott, let's talk a little bit about how you prioritize your long-term health now over short-term goals. You and I have talked before about, the high-intensity workouts, and you mentioned it, early on in your career, you were just kind of doing what you thought was best day by day. And do you use Garmin's technology to support that? And how can, fitness professionals maybe use this as a teaching point?
Yeah, I think the body battery, all the Garmin athletes just started working with the Garmin AI from the beta part. And it's been pretty interesting to see, because, like, I feel like I have a pretty good idea of, like, how I feel, understanding training load, coming off the back end of training for a marathon and now transitioning into a back of a way more traditional training schedule for me. And even that, like, in the past month, like, I've seen trends of, like, maybe I'm pushing too hard in some areas and, not as hard in other areas, kind of found that where that middle heart rate zone, just sort of where I lived in for a long period of time, and not adjusting sort of the highs and lows that probably produce the most results. And, part of that's a little bit, I haven't been able to do a bunch of that stuff for a long time. So it's sort of like go back to what I like. And so the evolution of high rocks is like, man, doing something really tough for a long period of time is like right up my alley. And, like, I'm not a short sprinter. I'm sort of a long survivor. And, seeing how to understand trends in your training, seeing how trends in, like, all sleep and recovery, and sort of how that puts together, and, like, what your day looks like, and sort of how to plan it out, and different things like that. So it's been really cool, especially for a person that feels like I got a pretty good pulse on, what I'm doing. And then, sort of being able to plan out sort of, all right, and then the cause and effect. All right, this is going to produce this, which, good, bad, or indifferent, is just going to, take a little bit of compensation to, an adjustment to kind of understand of, what the rest of a training week looks like, and truly how to get the best and most out of what you're trying to do that day.
Awesome. So now that we're kind of talking more again about technology, I know that Garmin obviously is into golf tech now, and there's one that's called, I think, a GPS 70, if I'm not mistaken. So can you tell us, how do you use that when you're going onto these courses? Like, how do you strategize that information with the shot planning and your overall confidence, along, of course, with your caddy? Do you use one more than the other? Do you use them together? How does that work?
Yeah, the S70 is the new golf watch, and it works with the rangefinder. And again, like, it'd be pretty cool to be able to play on tour with that. But we got a caddy and a yards book and a lot of years of experience to kind of help put that technology into play. But the mapping technology and the stuff that they use is pretty incredible. I'm old school. Like, hey, I use a yardage book, maybe a rangefinder, and, an awesome dude that's caddy for me for a really long time. And so we went out and tested, and we did 9 holes at the Colonial, and I sort of kept my math with the watch, and I sort of checked my math on him. And over the course of 9 holes, the watch was off by 2 yards. And I was like, man, I'm not good enough for that big of a difference. So, and I mean, that's not dealing with like wind adjustment, this and that. That's just stock yardages, based off of where we were in the course of play. But, especially anywhere new, any place I've never played before, just sort of utilize that and kind of get an idea of what in the world I'm looking at when I'm out there going around. So I used it when we were at Oakmont, a place I had never played. I had been there, but never played. And so utilize that to kind of help guide Lance around a little bit, kind of give him an idea of what he was looking at, kind of paint the picture a little bit, and then kind of let him go out there and react to sort of the information that I was giving him. But it's crazy when I first started with Garmin to now, like just the evolution of how they've pressed in the golf space has been pretty incredible.
So I do have a follow-up to that. You talk about some of these courses, but out of all the courses that you played, which would be your favorite? And then is there like a certain golfer that when you were growing up, I mean, I know you talked a lot about Tiger Woods. Is he the guy that, I mean, I know he inspired you, but is he your favorite? Do you have a favorite golfer?
I don't know. My daughter thinks it's weird when I get that question. She's 9. So the world of a 4th grader is like, you have a favorite player that's not you. And I was like, I don't have that personality where like I'm my favorite, but I don't really think about it like that. But Tiger definitely influenced the game. It's been pretty, crazy to see. Like I played on tour in 2013 when he was player of the year, and, saw things that, behind the scenes and different things like that. To see a play number 1 player in the world and do those different things was pretty awesome to be a part of. My favorite event on tour, of course, on tour is Muirfield, where they just played last week, where Scotty won. Jack was super nice to me my rookie year, and when he didn't have to be, no cameras, just a real genuine moment in the locker room. And I'd never met him before, and was just like, holy cow, that's Jack Nicklaus. And I'm like, hey, man. And just like, not necessarily like fanboy, but just, I was not expecting to see him. I was in the locker room by myself and, kind of minding my own business, doing my thing. And he came in and just sat and, kind of told me what he was doing. And, just super thankful for the time he spent, and especially for him to stick in there when, just being genuine and, pouring a little bit of time into someone that, had never been or anywhere close to, a facility like that. And, it was pretty cool. So I always remember that, every time we get a chance to go back.
No, I bet you that's special. So Scott, my last question is, where do you see the future of golf, whether it's golf fitness or golf tech or both? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I think the biggest difference in when I got started on tour to now is the data that's available to a player, from a technology standpoint, from a baseline standpoint, especially like how you would build almost like a fantasy game. Like, hey, this player, tends to do best in this environment, whether it's course conditions, driving, iron play, whatever. And you kind of put a stats to like what it takes to win or compete well at a certain event. That information was available, but it wasn't as accessible as it is now. And you don't have the true analytics guys to be able to put in and kind of understand like, hey, is the juice worth the squeeze to, be able to try to pick up a few more extra miles an hour? Or, hey, if we continue our baseline, or you start to see regression, which is obviously not fun for anybody. But as you get older, you start to understand like, hey, where do I have to kind of make up the difference here? As far as when the physicality of it, it's not as applicable in golf as it is in other sports, but it's definitely there. And if someone tells you that, they're lying. But, I remember when I first came out, to see a guy have a ball speed in the 170s was very rare. Now it is more uncommon. It's more common to see a guy in the 80s than the 60s. And which is pretty nuts. And I think that's a combination of the analytics, the technology, the fitting, and the fitness that starts out. I see it firsthand here at Tennessee. I mean, the speed that some of our guys can be able to put out. I tell them all the time, I said, if y'all figure out half of what I know, I will never be able to play on tour again. From just the pure physical skill that these guys have, it's something that, is developed younger and younger and younger. And I think the technology component of that is a huge part, but the fitness behind being able to support, the why and the what and the how, then there's way more continuity instead of you're just kind of throwing stuff at the wall and see what sticks.
Great.
So my last question that I have for you, Scott, is what's next for you? I mean, I know obviously golf is still a part of your life, but are you going to run another marathon, or what is going on in your world of golf?
Yeah, I'm still on a ball count, kind of working my way through that. I actually just scheduled some time with Greg Rose at the end of July. Hopefully the reins get pulled off. Adam was a huge part of that conversation today to kind of do some baseline stuff, kind of compared to my own. I did tenodesis to my left shoulder, so it'd be interesting to see kind of how that matches up from a 3D standpoint in my golf swing. But I gotta get off the ball count and really put some volume in there before I really go and spend some time with him when we're out there in California. But still progressing. My short game is pretty solid, but still being my kids. I'm going to a lacrosse tournament tomorrow, being a dad, husband, all the different things, and kind of enjoying the time away. Been fortunate enough to play for a long time on tour, and but I have enjoyed the time away and look forward to, continue to get back into a little bit of a routine. But I'm going to be where I'm at with understanding that, each and every day I'm going to, try to spend some time to try to get back to where I know I want to be and an opportunity to go and play and compete with the best players in the world.
Well, that's great, Scott. I know that there's so much more we could cover, but I think you really kind of opened us up to, the journey that you've been on for 14 years, how you've changed, how the industry's changed, and kind of a sneak peek of what's coming. So we can't thank you enough for your time. And I know it added a lot of value to everybody here that watches our podcast. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I appreciate y'all having me on.
Yes. Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Scott. All the best to you. Well, what another amazing guest. And, it's going to be fun to watch his, recovery and, back into the season, hopefully in, early next year into January. So, we'll be watching. He's got some big fans now with the NASM family.
Oh, yes. Great. And he's a Knoxville boy. So, I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. So
yeah, I knew you'd be a little partial to that. That's all good. There you go. So awesome. Well, Wendy, thank you for, all those probing questions. And for all of you that joined us this week on Master Instructor Roundtable, we can't thank you enough. And of course, we look to seeing you next week on another edition of the Master Instructor Roundtable.